Hey everyone, this is just a little update on our website and things that we've been doing. We've gotten a few emails over the years and a couple recently asking about ways to support us because we've been doing this for, I don't know, how many years now, Emma?
Ooh, 3
4
years? 4 years?
years? 5? I don't remember. We've been doing this-
2021 and it's 2024, so 3 years.
3 years? Okay. We've been doing this for a little bit now. And we've just been doing this as a hobby. But we've gotten, as I mentioned, a couple emails asking how to support us. And we've finally had enough interest to put up a little bit of something. So if you are interested in helping offset some of our costs, you can do that now. We have a support page if you go to support.isfitshappy.com. Or if the redirect is taking too long, because I know our website isn't always working properly, you can go to isfitshappy.podbean.com, and then at the top in the navigation section there's a support page there. You can find us there too. So it's just a one-time tip jar if you feel like, I don't know, like you want to support us a little bit. You don't have to.
Not mandatory.
Don't feel obligated at all. Eventually, as I mentioned in the past, I do want to set up a Patreon again with some bonus content. But for right now, there is nothing. It's just an empty tip jar. So this is probably the only shout out I'm going to do about that. We just put it up recently. So
yeah. And if you feel so inclined, thank you very much. We do this for fun. It is just a hobby, but it is a hobby that does cost us money. So we wouldn't mind getting $1 or $2 sent our way so we could pay for the website or pay for the domains and all that.
Right.
But again, not mandatory.
Definitely not mandatory.
You listening to us is all we need.
We already ask you guys to correct us and to email us.
And we ask questions all the time about what's happening in the future of the books that we don't remember. So
that's enough support for us, really. But thank you, everybody, again, who always is so kind in the messages and who actually does send in mail to correct us or to give their thoughts on things. And thank you to everybody who is just the silent listener. We appreciate everybody who downloads our podcast and is joining in the conversation one way or the other. So again, that is support.isfitshappy.com, or you can go to our website, isfitshappy.com, or isfitshappy.podbean.com, Podbean, and navigate to the top. There's a pages drop down menu in that navigation bar, and we have a support page where you can find that link as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy. I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
We're discussing Chapter 17, Bingtown Negotiations today. Took a little break, and now we are back at it.
Back at it again with the white vans.
Yes, indeed. So we are in Ronica's point of view. They're all gathering in the Traders' Concourse building that has been further burned by the Chalcedeans. And Ronica says that the Chalcedeans finished what the new traders had started. It's kind of in a big ruins. You know, it's not recognizable from when Ronica started sweeping before, a few chapters ago.
Right.
And was joined by other Bingtown traders to come together in a lovely sense of unity.
Yeah.
Now, Tintaglia has asked all of the leaders to gather, that she's going to meet them later on at some point, never really given a time. And they all meet here. And Ronica is kind of impressed with the tenacity of the Bingtown traders, that they will still choose to use this building even after the roof has been burned down and none of the decorations are there anymore. And there's hardly any chairs left standing.
Right.
It's just a place to stand.
It is kind of sad to think about because this seems like a big part of their history, and the decorations that have been destroyed are old tapestries and like the stuff that has been there probably since it started, and that's just gone now. And yet the Bingtown Trader Council still says that's the place to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people meeting. It's not just the heads, I guess, of each faction. It's
Right.
most people that are still left in Bingtown. Everybody wants to know what's going on and what decision is going to be made. So even in this big building, which we know is a big building because that's where they hosted the ball that
Mm-hmm.
before everything went wrong, that's where the ball was hosted. So it was big enough to host all of the major old trader families and have a dance floor or whatever. But now it's packed and there's people outside of the building trying to hear.
There was a strange equality to standing shoulder to shoulder with the others gathered here. Bingtown traders, new traders, tattooed slaves, and brawny fisherfolk, tradesmen and servants all stood with their friends and kin. They filled the hall. Outside, the overflow sat on the steps and clustered in groups on the grounds. Despite their differing origins, there was an odd sameness to the folk. All faces bore the shock and grief of the Chalcedean invasion and the havoc it had wrought. Battle and fire had treated them equally, from wealthy Bingtown trader to humble kitchen slave. Their clothes were stained with soot or blood, and sometimes both. Most looked unkempt. Children huddled near parents or neighbors. Weapons were carried openly. The talk was muttered and low, and most had to do with the dragon. Yeah, all of them are kind of standing equally, but crowding around this building and talking about Tintaglia because she's the one who ordered them to gather and made a huge impact.
Right. And not everybody was there to see the impact or find out what happened, or I guess see what happened firsthand. So it's a lot of people retelling the story and explaining what happened to people who weren't there, and just a lot of antsiness, I would say.
Yeah.
But I also like the picture being painted through Ronica's eyes of like, this is how things used to be. This is truly the Bingtown way because everyone is on equal footing instead of having that separation between old traders and everyone else.
So then Ronica explains about how there is that raised dais in the Trader Concourse building and who is on that dais. Cyrilla was there representing Jamalia with Road Karen glowering beside her. And Veronica is kind of upset that Cyrilla is still standing next to Road Karen even after the attack on the new traders, right before the attack of the Chalcedeans that we spoke about last episode.
Right.
But there's also Sparse Kelter up on the dais, and Dugia, leader of the Tattooed, and Trader Jevoshe, Conry, and Dror represented the Bingtown Council. Ronica did not know if they were the only surviving council heads or the only ones bold enough to dare displeasing Karen and his cohorts. They stood well away from Cyrilla and Road. At least that separation had been established. And then Mingsley was there for the new traders. And then Selden was also standing up there, or sitting on the dais. His eyes wandered over the crowd below him with an air of preoccupation. Only Mingsley had dared question his right to be there. Selden had met his gaze squarely. "I will speak for us all when the dragon comes," he had assured the man. "And if needed, I will speak for the dragon to you. I must be here so she can see me above the crowd." "What makes you think she will come here?" Mingsley had demanded. Selden had smiled an otherworldly smile. "Oh, she will come, never fear." He blinked his eyes slowly. "She sleeps now. Her belly is full." When her grandson smiled, the silvery scaling across his cheeks rippled and shone. Mingsley had stared and then stepped back from the boy. Ronica feared that she could already detect a blue shimmer to Selden's lips beneath the chapping. How could he have changed so much, so swiftly? As baffling, perhaps, was the inordinate pleasure he took in the changes. And then last but not least, Jani Cooperus is up there as well, representing the Reyn Wild Traders. and she was standing protectively behind Selden. And Ronica was glad she was there, but also kind of wondering if she would claim the last heir to the Vestrit family and carry him off to Trehog. And yet, if she did not, what place would there be for him in Bingtown? So she's kind of wondering at the future of her own family and of Bingtown.
Yeah, and I do want to quick mention something that we skipped over, which is that there is other tensions on the dais between Mingsley and the Dugia, because Dugia was a slave in Mingsley's household, and Mingsley was not a good master, I guess. I hate using that word, but he wasn't a good owner to her, and she had a pretty hard life under him, apparently. So I thought that was an interesting little detail, too. There's all these factions and the leaders of these factions, and even in between there's fighting and not fighting, right. I guess, but
tension.
Yeah, tension happening. And so I found that to be a really interesting detail, that they're still up there leading despite not trusting each other necessarily.
Right.
I guess really it's the three fisher folk that are the only one who don't have super bad blood with anybody. Like Sparse Kelter doesn't seem to have any negative history in particular with any of the other leaders.
Right. I mean, Eki Kelter has issues with the Bingtown traders, and I'm sure Sparse does too, but
I think
it's not direct.
Yeah, to the level of everyone else, like Rode and the old traders, and then Dugia and Mingsley. Like, that's a little bit more, I don't know, in your face.
Ronica also describes how Keffria is standing close to the dais and close to Selden so she could reach out and touch the boy, but she didn't. Ronica's daughter had been silent since Reyn had brought Selden to them. She had looked at the silvery path of scales across the tops of her son's cheeks, but she had not touched them. Selden had joyously told her that Malta was alive, for the dragon said so. When Keffria had said nothing in response to his news, he had seized her arm as if to awaken her from sleep. "Mother, put your grief aside. Tintaglia can bring Malta back to us. I know she can." "I will wait for that," Keffria had said faintly. No more than that. And now she looked up at her son as if he were a ghost, as if a tracery of scales had removed him from her world.
I really do feel bad for Keffria, because thinking about things from her perspective, this is just really hard. We already know that she's really struggling with the fact that she thinks Malta is dead.
Yeah.
And that she is kind of distancing herself from Selden as a result, because she just doesn't feel like she can lose anyone else. And so she doesn't want to be attached to Selden, so that when he inevitably is taken from her, then she doesn't hurt as bad, I guess, was her.
But also we see from her perspective, when she comes in later in this chapter, her anger at Tintaglia and her descriptions of how she is relating, how everybody starts to look like the dragon. Like Jani looks like the dragon, and Reyn looks like the dragon, and Selden is starting to be claimed by the dragon. So with her anger at Tintaglia, with the loss of Malta, she's wondering if she's already lost her son.
Yeah, and so that's what I was just about to bring up, is that not only is she like trying to keep him at a distance because she can't handle any more loss, that didn't save him from being lost to her. I'm using air quotes in that, because he does now look like the dragon. And so in a way, he also has been taken from her. And I feel like that's really hard for her. I mean, everybody she knows, I guess, except her mom, but she didn't seem to have a very close relationship with Ronica.
Yeah.
Everyone that she deeply, deeply cared about and was worried about has been taken at this point. And that's just really hard. I don't know. I feel for her, and it seems like she's kind of not really able to believe in whatever the dragon has said. And I don't think it's because of Reyn, because at this point, I'm sure they haven't had any conversations about how the dragon's a liar, but more just that she is so broken that she doesn't want to hope.
Right.
Which I guess could also be the argument for why Reyn doesn't trust Tintaglia. But that one's a little bit more, that's a different case to me, because to me, I don't understand why he thinks Tintaglia would lie about that, because when has he lied to him about stuff like that, but maybe she has. I don't know. But yeah, for her, it would be too painful to hope Malta is still alive.
Yeah. Veronica also describes how Greg is kind of nearby to Kefria as well, talking with Greg, and they seem to have a disagreement, even though it's civil but intense. Difference of opinions there.
Mm-hmm.
And Veronica is also kind of looking at the assembled crowd in general. And she's smiling grimly to herself as she sees that Selden is still her grandson. Despite his scales, he was still a Vestrit. But maybe those changes aren't that drastic because there's a lot of people here who also have tattoos on their face.
Right.
Maybe it's not a matter of, oh, he has to be taken to the Reyn Wilds to have a normal life or anything like that, or be accepted. There's a lot of changes.
Right. Because she mentions that the Bingtown people who were taken by the Chalcedean ship had escaped because of Tintaglia's attack on the ship. She had destroyed the ship. They swam to the shore. But while they were in the hold, they had already mostly all been forcibly tattooed because the Chalcedeans were claiming the people they were taking as slaves so that they could get the reward for every slave that they personally captured. So a lot of people have very fresh tattoos that probably thought they would never be tattooed ever.
Yeah, including some new traders, Veronica says.
Right. So it's not even just old traders that this has happened to. It's everyone in Bingtown, like a little bit of everybody in Bingtown. And that she thinks may have swayed people's opinion about outward looks, I guess, but also probably slavery.
So Veronica reflects that Tintaglia, after she had chased and sated herself on the Chalcedeans, returned and said, "Gather your leaders." And the sun had been high then, but now it is nearing to night.
Right.
So it's been a half a day, and they're just kind of waiting for Tintaglia here.
Yeah.
So
and
tensions are high.
Unfortunately, we don't know how long they have been waiting because, I mean, to me, I guess the way I read this at first was just that they have just all arrived, sort of, not just arrived, but like maybe this is like 30 minutes, an hour in, not necessarily.
My guess would be this is 4 or 5 hours of waiting.
Okay. That just feels weird to me because why wouldn't they have already brought together a meeting? Because the whole deal was they needed to agree, right? So why wouldn't anybody, if it was 4 or 5 hours in, why wouldn't somebody have already started the conversation of what are we going to do? Why would you wait that long before being like, okay, let's have a conversation? So that's why I feel like it hasn't been 4 or 5 hours. I feel like it took that long for every single person to get there, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Could be. But Trader Javouche steps forward, and Veronica's kind of surprised that Cyrilla doesn't take the lead here, but one of the traders does. He steps forward and says that we have gathered here in the Bingtown Traders Concourse. I'm going to step in as the leader here. We are gathered here, all the folk of Bingtown, to discuss what we will do about the dragon that has descended upon us. Veronica agrees with that tack, basically saying that, present a united front. We're all of us against one problem first. We don't have to discuss the issues between us. Get us all on the same side versus the dragon.
Right.
She has driven the Chalcedean fleet from our harbor and hunted down several roving bands of raiders. For now, she has disappeared from our skies, but she said she would soon return. Before she does, we must decide how to deal with her. She has freed our harbor. What are we prepared to offer her in exchange? And he takes a breath, he pauses, and a bunch of people start yelling out. Basically, Greg already made a deal, so
we need to honor that.
Yeah, we need to do a simple task for her.
Or we don't owe her anything. Like there's a big swath of replies. It's not all either we hate her or we love her. There's the gray in between. People all have opinions on what should be next.
And then there's still some like, I'm not a traitor. I'm not going to be bound by one man's word. There's some of the divisive replies as well in there.
Yeah, some people want to kill the dragon because they've heard tales of dragons being treacherous.
And Mingsley yells out quiet. Ronica can tell that he is frightened, but he speaks up and has a very loud and commanding voice and saying, "We have no time for squabbling. We must move swiftly to an accord. When the dragon returns, we must meet her as a united folk. Resistance would be a mistake. You saw what she did to those ships and the men. We must placate her if we hope to avoid the same fate." And Road Karen then speaks up. Of course he does, saying, "Perhaps some here deserve the same fate as the Chalcedeans." Road turns to the crowd. "I heard it spoken clearly earlier. A traitor has already struck an accord with the dragon. The dragon is ours. She belongs to the Bingtown traders. We should honor our bargain, Bingtown traders, without recourse to any of the foreigners who have sought to claim our town as their own. With the dragon on our side, Bingtown can not only drive the dirty Chalcedeans back to their own land, we can force out the new traders and their thieving slaves with them. We have all heard the news. The satrap is dead. We cannot rely on Jamalia to aid us. Bingtown traders, look around you. We stand in our ruined hall in a ravaged town. How have we come to this pass? By tolerating the greedy new traders in our midst, folk who came here in violation of our charter to plunder our land and beggar us." So he's basically advocating to claim the dragon for their own and use the dragon to put Bingtown back to where it was.
Right.
What he wants to all along. And Cyrilla steps forward towards Road Karen and puts a hand in the center of his chest and shoves him off the dais.
Yeah, which, did he turn to look at her? Is that how she got to the center of his chest?
Yeah. So Companion Cyrilla steps forward resolutely. As Roed turned, surprised, she set her small hand to the center of his chest. So he could feel her like come up behind him, and then he turns to look at her.
Right.
And she just shoves him over because he wasn't expecting it.
Which is very funny to me, personally. Not that violence is ever the answer, but it's kind of funny to think about, like...
It's probably like 2 feet high or something.
Yeah, he's fine. You know? And Ronica does say if he had been expecting the fall, it would be no big deal. He would have just jumped off. It wouldn't hurt at all. But he wasn't expecting it, so he kind of...
hits his head
on the ground and falls a bit more.
And then Cyrilla says, stand clear of him, because as the crowd kind of converses on him.
Right. People want to hurt him.
Yeah. He says, disperse or share his fate. Road alone remained as he was sitting there as other people melted back into the crowd, but Road is still held immobile. Cyrilla says, take him away. But then, for the first time, Ronica sees on Cyrilla's face a true spirit, as if a true spirit resided in her. Her face is a light, as Ronica describes it. So she actually has some passion leaking out of her, according to Ronica, at least.
Well, I think especially thinking about what we know, it's probably really big for her to get rid of Road on her own terms, and to be able to denounce him herself. Like she's using her own power to say, I don't stand by him. Put him away. This is bad.
He's seeking division. We need to stand together.
And so she's making the most of this situation and giving herself more power. And I think just that.
Gotta consolidate that power.
Yeah. That, but also just that she has had all this fear in the back of her mind that maybe she can't get power. And now she's kind of done it. And Ronica says she is almost successful. She just adds a little bit too much.
Because she advocates for herself here, saying, we need to be a united front. And as a representative of the satrapy, even if the satrap is dead, I'm still that representative. You put that in here. You put that power in me. The satrap put his power under my command. The satrapy didn't die with him. Jamalia is still around.
Right.
So let me speak for you, all of you, as a interested but separate third party. And that's what's best for everybody, right? So I'm the one negotiating everything. And Dugia speaks up and says, I speak for the tattooed when we say Jamalia has way too much say over our labor, how we live, and everything. You're not going to speak for us.
We will have a voice in what is promised to the dragon. For too long, others have disposed of our labor and our lives. We can tolerate it no longer. So there is this sort of feeling of she overstepped just a little by saying, why don't you all go home? I'll meet with the dragon by myself and figure it out for you. And isn't that what's best? And Ronica does say, compared to what Rode was just saying, it almost seems reasonable. Yeah. Maybe it would be good to have an outside third party with no stake in the game make all the decisions for this wild group of people. But with Gia speaking in or coming in and saying, hey, listen, we already tried that with Jamelia and look at where we ended up. We are slaves.
Yeah.
I'm tired of that. We're tired of it. That's not happening. You don't get to make all the decisions.
As we've discussed in previous episodes, the new traders are allying with Cirilla and Jamelia here, which is no surprise to anybody. So Mingsley speaks up against Dugia and resorts to ad hominems and just kind of says that she was a thief and she kind of did this to herself.
Yeah, so, I knew this would happen. Yeah, you're ruining everything.
Yeah.
Nothing is good enough for you.
And then continues on saying, good people of Bingtown, the slaves are not as separate folk, save that they are marked for their crimes. As well give the whores a right to speak in this, or the pickpockets. Let us listen to Cirilla. We are all Jamelian, old trader and new, and all should be content to be bound by the satrap's word. I speak for the new traders when I say I accept companion Cirilla to negotiate for us with the dragon. Cirilla stood straight and tall. She smiled, and it seemed genuine. She looked past Mingsley to include Dugia in the smile. As the satrap's representative, of course I shall negotiate for you. For all of you. New trader Mingsley has not well considered his words. Has he forgotten that some in Bingtown now wear the tattoos of slavery, when their only crime was to be captured by the Chalcedeans? For Bingtown to survive and prosper, it must go back to its oldest roots. By its charter, it was a place where ambitious outcasts could forge new homes and lives for themselves. Left here to wield the satrap's power, I too am an exile of sorts. Never again will I return to Jamelia. Like you, I must become a citizen of Bingtown and build a new life for myself here. Look at me. Consider that I embody all that Bingtown is. Come, she urged them softly. She looked around at the crowd. Accept me. Let me speak for all of you and bind us into one accord. And then Jani Kupra steps forward, sadly shaking her head and saying, we're not content to be bound to the satrap's word. I speak for the Reyn Wilds, and we're not going to be part of Jamelia anymore.
Right. Like, what have you guys ever done for us outside of making us pay taxes and making things more expensive?
Yeah.
Putting regulations on where we can and can't trade.
Bind Jamelia as you will, but the Reyn Wilds will bear the yoke no more. We know more of this dragon than you do. We will not let you bargain our lives away to placate her. My people have said that I speak for them, and I shall. I have no right to let their voices be muffled in yours. And she exchanges a glance with Reyn, and Ronica senses that Jani and Reyn had spoken of this beforehand, so Reyn speaks up and says, listen to her, the dragon is not to be trusted. You must guard your senses against her glamour and your hearts against her clever words. Basically, I was deceived before. Do not be deceived yourselves. She is tricksy.
Tricksy little hobbitses.
Yes.
Yeah, this is really interesting to me because it really talks to all the different reasons why Jamelia is failing at being the leader of this place. Obviously, the slaves have, or ex-slaves, I should say, have thoughts on how they have been wronged through Jamelia.
Yeah.
I mean, with Jamelia's knowledge, they have become slaves, and we don't know all of the slave stories, but either way, slavery is horrendous. And so they have really had some awful things happen to them. And so, of course, they're not going to want to listen to what the representative of Jamelia has to say for them.
Right.
And then we also have the Reyn Wild people delegation who also have been ignored largely by Jamelia, mostly because they've been in hiding, but also...
And they've been leaning towards independence for a while, too.
Right. Yeah. And because really, what does Jamelia offer for Bingtown? Like, there's not a lot that they're getting, especially with how the new satrap ran things. And then I also think about how hard this job must be for Jani, because obviously this was not the plan when she came here, but she does know what her friends and family would want.
Right.
So she knows how to step up and be the advocate for her people. It's just one of those things where this is a very last minute deciding, yeah, I have to be an advocate for my people, because I don't think they had the idea that they're going to match with everyone else when they got here, right? Like, they kind of came into Bingtown blind of what was even going on there.
Right. Jani's job, it was to be sent as an advocate for her people, but it was to ask Bingtown for help.
Right.
It was to ask Bingtown for help for the natural disaster that they had.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess she was selected, but now it's just a completely different kind of representative. So Reyn is kind of speaking to the whole crowd about how you can't trust Tintaglia. We have been told that she is sleeping off a full belly. Dare any of us ask, full of what? On what meat has she fed? As his words settle on his listeners, he added, many of us would rather die than be slaves anymore. Well, I would rather die than be either her slave or her food. Kind of insisting that she feels that she is better than the humans just because of the way that she is. And that she isn't better than any of them, that she's very similar to humans.
Right. And that she can lie and she can make things up, and that they need to be wary.
And perfect timing, Tintaglia kind of
has heard all of this.
Yes, has heard Reyn's speech here. Although the doors were too small to admit her, Ronica wondered if even the stout stone walls could withstand a determined assault by the dragon. An instant later, the creature reared up. Her clawed front feet came to rest on the top of the wall. Her cart-sized head on her serpentine neck looked down on them all. She snorted, and Reyn Kupris was staggered by the blast of air from her nostrils. So, I am a beast cunning enough to speak, am I? And what title do you give yourself then, human? With your paltry years and truncated memory, how can you claim to be my equal?
To be fair to Tintaglia, she has a point. Like, what difference does it make if she's just a beast with the ability to speak? I mean, what are humans really? And I guess maybe my view is a little skewed because we know that in this world specifically, some animals are wit capable, which makes me feel like a lot of animals are capable of providing thoughts and commentary on the world around them. But obviously, Reyn does not have, and it may not be as common here to have the wit, capital W, where you connect to animals, which is really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
How probably that makes it genetic, and also it's interesting to see that a different region wouldn't really have witted people. You think there'd be one or two, but I guess maybe there are. There's no saying that there's not witted people here,
right.
just that
the
Reyn for
not
sure
about
isn't.
them.
Yeah.
So everyone is kind of pressing back and leaving Reyn to confront Tintaglia here, but Selden jumps down and steps in between the dragon and Reyn, saying, welcome, Gleaming One. We have gathered here as you bid us. We have awaited your return, Sky Ruler, and we might learn exactly what task you wish us to perform. Ah, I see. You did not then gather to plot against me? No one has seriously considered such a thing, Selden lied valiantly. Perhaps we are merely humans, but we are not stupid. Who among us could think to defy your scaled mightiness? Many tales have we told one another of your valiant deeds today. All have heard of your fearsome breath, of the wind of your wings and the strength of your tail. All recognize that without your glorious might, our enemies might have overrun us. Think how sorrowful this day could have been for us, for they would have had the honor of serving you instead of us. Whom, Ronica wondered, did Selden address? Did he flatter the dragon, or were his words to remind the gathered folk that other humans could serve her just as well? The people of Bingtown could be replaced. Perhaps the only way to survive was to claim to serve her willingly. And then Tintaglia spins her silver eyes in pleasure at Selden's words, and Ronica feels herself drawn into them. She was truly magnificent. The lapping of the scales on her face reminded Ronica of the flexible links of fine jewelry chain. As Tintaglia considered the gathered folk, her head swayed gently from side to side. Ronica felt caught in that motion, unable to tear her attention away. The dragon was both silver and blue. Every movement called forth both colors from her scales. The grace of her bent neck was like a swan's. Ronica was seized with a desire to touch the dragon, to discover for herself if the smoothly undulating hide were warm or cool. All around her, people edged towards the dragon, entranced with her loveliness. Ronica felt the tension ebb away from her. She felt weary still, but it was a good weariness, like the soft ache of muscles at the end of a useful day. So we can see here that Tintaglia is entrancing the whole crowd and really specifically focusing on the people who can see her eyes right now. As we see later, if she turns her attention away, that effect kind of subsides a bit. But here we see the effect of dragon glamour.
Right, in full force, with people who have not been previously touched by her.
Right.
So I feel like that's a really interesting point of view to get as somebody like Ronica who has never had contact with her before, but yet is able to be swayed over to the glamour that she's portraying.
Yeah, and I have highlighted quite a few sections in this chapter about the dragon glamour, and I don't have to go into detail about all of them, but it's all kind of the same details. You know, it's Ronica feeling like she's swayed or is enamored of the dragon even without due cause, really, and switches pretty instantly from being enamored to being like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting to see her sort of be like, yeah, this is important. This is we should just listen to the dragon.
Yeah.
And not think anything of it until the dragon looks away and then being like, oh, I was just under the spell. And I think that's also the first glance we've gotten at something that's very serpent-like from the dragon. This is a thing that is a skill that is carried over from when they're serpents. So I found that detail to be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. So Tintaglia, with them all entranced, explains that they just have to dredge out parts of the Reyn River. And Ronica in her head is like, that's it? That simple thing? Then somebody in the back of the crowd shouts a question saying, why do you want the serpents to be able to go up the Reyn River? And Tintaglia explains that they're young dragons. They're the young of the dragons.
Yeah.
And explains the whole life cycle. Well, not the whole life cycle, but basically the importance of the serpents to dragons to the gathered people there.
Right. And talks about why it has to be the Reyn River because originally there were those black sands with the memory sand in the Reyn River, but that has been since washed away. And the only other place that has the correct elements for cocooning is down the river where it gets shallow. And so the serpents can't make it there.
Yeah.
So this is to save the race, which she's trying to make seem like is a really big deal. And it's not a big ask of them anyway. And this is important. Like, of course you want the other dragons to be born like her. So it's really interesting to see how that works on Ronica.
Yeah.
And how she is really swayed and thinking
she's
like, oh,
that is a simple ask. That's it.
Very simple, reasonable ask. I get it. But they do get dragon lore, I guess.
Right. There is a little bit of pushback again from people in the back saying like, what? That's in the Reyn wilds? The water is acid. Only the rain is drinkable. The land trembles constantly. Folk who live in the Reyn wilds for too long go mad. Their children are born dead or deformed, and as they age, their bodies become monstrous. All know that. And then Ronica realizes that Tintaglia is laughing at that. Folk can live by the Rainwild River. Trehog is proof of that. But before Trehog, long before, there were wondrous cities on the banks of the Rainwild River. There can be again. I will show you how the water may be made drinkable. The land has subsided. You must live in the trees as they do in Trehog. There is no help for that. Veronica felt an odd prickling sensation in her mind. She blinked her eyes rapidly. Something... that was what had changed. The dragon had shifted her gaze to a different part of the gathering. Veronica felt more alert again. She resolved to be more wary of the dragon's spinning glance. So there we see Veronica kind of shaking out of it slightly, just being aware that something had entranced her a bit.
Right. It's kind of like in D&D when you cast like some convince person spell, and at the end they realize that you've casted a spell on them and it makes them a little bit more distrustful of you. That's basically what's happening here.
Right, yeah. That's a good comparison. Like Friends, I think it is.
Yeah.
The cantrip. But then Jani speaks up because of the mention of the Rainwilds and the talk about the Rainwilds and living there. And she says, indeed, folk can live in the Rainwilds, but not without cost and not without skill. We're proof of that. We will not allow those lands to be taken from us, basically. No others know how to subsist beside the river, know how to build in the trees, or how to withstand the madness seasons. The buried city we once mined for trade goods is lost to us now. We must find other ways to survive there. Nevertheless, the Rainwilds are our home. We will not surrender them. Then you must be the one to do the winter guarding, the dragon told her smoothly. Because also in that part of the bargain, Tintaglia said, dredge out the rivers, and then when they cocoon, you guys need to guard against predators or anything that would harm them. So Tintaglia adds, you guys are more suited to that task than you know, which just means that they've been living by the cities for so long that they're already kind of affected by the
they're already vaguely elderlings.
So that the influence from the cocooning serpents won't affect them as much as new humans, probably.
Presumably.
Yeah, presumably. Because Tintaglia probably doesn't know.
Right, yeah. She's just kind of like, yeah.
She's just convincing the humans to do what she wants.
Yeah, she's kind of trying to tell people what they want to hear.
So Jani is kind of steeling herself and saying, that perhaps we can do if certain conditions are met. Let torches be kindled, the settling of the details may take some time. But surely not long, the dragon intoned warningly.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the race of her people are at stake. Of course, she's going to want to get this figured out as quick as possible. But I think it is also unrealistic to think people won't have a say, even if she is using glamour.
Yeah, so Jani kind of gets down to business here and is bargaining on both sides and is understanding and very practical in that this is not just going to be some workers shoveling out the middle of a river. This is going to take engineers and planning and maybe even building another city next to that site. And Tintaglia's like, no, that's way too long. So Jani's like, okay, then we need extra workers.
Right.
So that means you need to free the live ships so we can get those workers and materials. And Tintaglia's like, okay, yeah, I can go after the Kendry and the other live ships. That's fine. Can you get it done as fast as possible? And Jani's like, well, then we might need to dip into the workers of Bingtown if they're willing to come up and help.
Right. And so I think this is really important because this is what the traders know, right? Yeah. They're making a deal. And I think Tintaglia probably hasn't really had the memories to experience humans who wanted to negotiate.
Who would negotiate with dragons from her memories?
Right. They would just do whatever she said because she's a dragon. And here she needs their help. So they do a little bit have leverage because if they choose not to help, then that's the end of her race. So
yeah,
it's very interesting to see this sort of change, I guess, that they're all dealing with. And it kind of puts the Rainwilders and the traders in general on better footing because they're used to making deals.
This is familiar ground.
Right.
And Jani speaks up saying about the workers, like, yeah, we're going to need a lot of extra workers then, but they're going to need to be fed and paid. So where do we get the money from? And Tintaglia's like,
I don't know.
Food?
Yeah.
She's getting like, and money? She's getting really angry.
Yeah, she's like, why do I care about that? And it's like, because if you want us to do it, we need to be able to live.
But Dugia speaks up, saying, there is no need to go to Jamalia for workers. My people are here. The tattooed were brought here to work and paid nothing at all. Some of us will be willing to go up the river and do this work, not for money, but for a chance. A chance for homes and futures of our own. Give us, to begin with, food and shelter. We will work to make our own fortunes. Jani turned to confront her. A terrible hope gleamed in the Reyn-Wild woman's face. She spoke clearly and slowly, laying out the terms of a bargain. To come to the Reyn-Wild, you must become of the Reyn-Wild. You cannot hold yourselves back from us. She stared deep into Dugia's eyes, but the tattooed woman did not glance away from Jani's Reyn-Wild scales and gently glowing eyes. Jani smiled at her. Then her eyes suddenly roved over the assembled people. She seemed to see the tattooed in a new way. Your children would have to take husbands and wives among us. Your grandchildren would be Reyn-Wilders. There is no leaving once you have come to the Reyn-Wilds. You cannot remain a separate people with separate ways. It is not an easy life. Many will die. Do you understand what you are offering? Dugia cleared her throat. When Jani glanced back at her, she met her look squarely. You say we must become of the Reyn-Wild. Reyn-Wild traders are what you call yourselves. That is what we would become? Traders? With the rights of traders? Those who marry Reyn-Wild traders always become Reyn-Wild traders. Mingle your families with ours, and yours become ours. Our homes would be our own. Whatever we acquired, it would be ours? Of course. Dugia looked out over the assembled folk. Her eyes sought out the tattooed groups. This is what you told me you wanted. Homes and possessions that you could pass on to your children, to be on an equal footing with your neighbors. The Reyn-Wilders offer us this. They warn us fairly of hardships to come. I have spoken for you, but each of you must decide. And then someone else steps forward from the tattooed saying, what if we don't want to go? And Cirilla then takes the chance to step forward and speak and makes a nice little speech of like, oh, I'm speaking with the power of the satrapy or whatever. And
right.
Tattooed there's going to be no more slavery in Bingtown ever. The tattooed are freed. And then undermining that is somebody who yells up, we were always free.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, respect to Cirilla for trying to take back over control of the situation, especially in the face of a dragon. That's pretty...
It's ballsy.
Yeah,
sure.
It is. That's what I was going to say.
She's trying to grab whatever power she can still. Mm-hmm. You know, even if she had a conscious change to, well, not a conscious change, but the willpower to act on her conscious and throw out Road Karen from her, her party, I guess.
Right.
She's still trying to gather all the power that she can to secure her future.
Yeah. And interestingly, she still plays by the rules of being the satrap's companion.
Because that's her only power right now,
right.
She thinks. Yeah.
And so I found that interesting specifically because she then goes to tell the tattooed, like, hey, I can't free you because according to the charter, like, the Bingtown people are allowed to make their own decisions on that sort of thing. But I can tell you that you won't become slaves again.
Well, no, she says that I can't put you on an equal footing as the traders because that's against the charter. But I can say that there are no slaves ever here.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not, I can't free you. It's, I can't elevate you.
Yeah. So I can't make you equals, but I can say no more slaves. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Mingsley speaks up and he's like, yeah, but indentured servants, though, are a different matter. And everyone shouts him down. And then
the
Tintaglia is like, stop.
Tintaglia is like, I literally don't care about this. My people are dying. Like, there are more important things. Please shut up. Like,
Tintaglia looks at Jani Kupris and kind of states her side here. You can draw on Bingtown for engineers and planners. You have a labor force. I myself will soar forth tomorrow to free the Kendry and find the other live ships and send them to you. I pledge I will keep the waters between Trehog and Bingtown clear of enemy ships while you do this work. Surely all is now in agreement. The flickering torchlight caressed her wondrous form. Ronica felt as if she were in the tale of enchantment, witness to a great miracle. The petty problems that remained suddenly seemed unworthy of discussion. Had not Tintaglia pointed out that they were creatures of brief life? Surely it could matter little what happened in such a tiny flicker of time as they occupied. Serving Tintaglia in restoring dragons to the world would be a way to ensure their lives had some impact on the greater world. A sigh of agreement ran through the crowd. Ronica moved her own head in a slow nod. So again, Tintaglia kind of exerts her will on the crowd there.
Right.
And all of them are fairly in agreement.
Yeah, and I mean, I find this really interesting because once again, Ronica is taken over by the glamour.
Right.
And she seems to be in agreement. I mean, it's not a bad deal for her, right? But we do see that sort of manipulation from Tintaglia of, yeah, who cares about the future of Bingtown? We're so short-lived. Let's make sure the dragons stay alive.
Right.
Which Ronica doesn't care about.
No.
She does care about the future of Bingtown.
She's the most staunchly Bingtown person that we've seen.
Literally. So it's interesting to see her and hear that the rest of the crowd is kind of sighing, like, yeah, let's do that. So Tintaglia can really affect people. I don't know. I just find that like such an interesting little detail of.
And you got to kind of apply that to Bolt now. And Bolt doesn't have the eyes really. The eyes can spin.
Right.
But there's not everything there, right? We don't have that influence coming from Bolt.
Right.
But there's still dragons are extremely manipulative.
Yeah. And it kind of does feel like a skill thing, right? Like it feels, I don't know if it is.
Well, dragon magic, right?
Right.
But yeah.
It's in the same vein. Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked before about how the magics are all sort of a circle.
Yeah.
That's mentioned in the books. And I think also somebody wrote in and mentioned it. So I can never remember if it actually is something that the books say. But it does seem as though.
Chade talks about the circle of magic.
Yeah. So everything, even though they're not necessarily all the same thing, they're on that spectrum of the circle. They're at some point in the wheel.
Yeah.
And closely related. And so I feel like dragon magic is right next to skill in the wheel.
I feel like dragon magic is the center, to be honest. I feel
everything else goes around it.
Yeah, I feel like everything else comes from it.
Okay. But yeah, so it's really interesting to see similarities where this does feel like when other people are being skill commanded, right? Like when Fitz deals with being skilled, it is similar sort of. He is feeling like it's his ideas. In this case, Ronica feels like it's her thoughts, but it is very clear to the reader that this is being influenced by somebody else.
Right.
This is not their thoughts. This is whoever is telling them through the skill what they want them to do. That's their thoughts.
Well, during that lull where everyone's kind of slowly nodding their agreement, Kefria speaks up and says, Malta. The word disturbed Ronica. It had grown so quiet within the concourse that the sound was like a pebble dropped in a still pool. A few heads turned toward them. Her daughter took a deep breath and spoke the name louder. Malta. What is it? Tintaglia demands. Kefria stepped forward, aggression in her stride. Malta, she shouted the name. Malta was my daughter. I am told you lured her to her death, and now, by some wicked magery, my son, my last child, stands before you and praises you. All my people murmur and smile at sight of you, like babies entranced with a shiny dangle. As Kefria spoke, Ronica felt a strange agitation. How dare she speak so to this glorious and benevolent creature, the creature who had rescued all of Bingtown, the creature responsible for Malta's death? Ronica felt an instant of disorientation, as if she woke from a deep sleep. And so we switch over to Kefria's point of view as she's stepping forward and speaking to Tintaglia.
Right. And Selden tries to stop her. And Kefria doesn't care. She's cutting him off because she's had enough. This is too much.
And Selden, I'm sure, is like, but the dragon says Malta's alive.
Yeah, the dragon's great. And she's like, shut up, Selden. I'm doing mother things.
Her rising anger at how the dragon manipulated the crowd had cracked her frozen heart. Fury poured out with her pain. Basically yells at Tintaglia saying, I'm not going to succumb to your glamour. I'm not going to be entranced by you. You caused my family pain. Breathe on me and melt the flesh from my bones. It will be worth it if it opens my son's eyes to you and the eyes of those others willing to grovel before you. She spat her final words. You refuse to heed the words of Reyn as she talks to the crowd. Watch now and see what this creature truly is.
So I just want to pause because this part makes me a little frustrated because I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to
just trying to like martyr herself.
Yeah, and also like her being like, you killed my daughter. First of all, she has no idea what happened with the dragon. She's never even talked to the dragon outside of this experience. So she doesn't know. She's going based off what Reyn said.
And Jani.
Okay, touche.
Yeah.
But I think it's also frustrating because she's like, this is an evil creature and you all are fawning over her, which fair. A lot of people are being entranced.
Mass manipulation and like emotional magic. Yeah.
I feel like I'm really like taking away from my argument by saying all this, but still for her to be like, oh, I'll open your eyes to who she really is. Kill me now so they can see. It feels kind of dumb to me because honestly, Tintaglia is helping Bingtown and she doesn't have to, right? Like maybe I'm being glamored, but she's agreeing to go after the ships and save all the live ships to bring them back to Bingtown. She's agreeing to keep the harbor clean and clear so they don't have to worry about a war.
But it's a trade agreement.
I mean, it is a trade agreement, but it seems like
she's
a pretty
getting
fair.
something. She's getting something back.
Oh, I'm not saying she's doing it out of altruistic motion or needs or whatever, but she is giving a fair deal, almost more than fair, because honestly, all they're doing is just digging out a river in exchange for winning a war, basically. You know what I mean? Like they're getting a better end of the deal, whether or not each party feels that way. I feel as an outside objective third party, to quote Cirilla, the Bingtown people are getting a really good deal in this.
So is Tintaglia, though. They're both doing things that the other cannot do.
Right. But to sit there, hear this agreement, and then go, I'll show you who she really is. I'm going to get myself killed because I'm depressed and don't want to watch my last living relative that's younger than me be taken away from me as well.
It's a good notion. I don't want the people who I love and my community to be, manipulated into fawning after a creature who could possibly have killed my daughter.
Right. No,
and is
that's
doing
valid.
this under, magical, very odd means.
Okay.
Like go into it with your eyes open. Like if you still want to do everything, that's fine. But like, try to shake off her glamour.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that's fair. I mean,
Kefria's diving headfirst into it. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
She's going straight to martyrdom as opposed to like
talking it out, asking a question. I don't know. And I mean, okay, I think
and it's going to work too. Tintaglia is rearing back her head and is about to do it.
Tintaglia is like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
But like, I think that's the one thing about this read that is frustrating to me because I just don't understand why she's going from 0 to 100 here. That's hard to say. I do understand. I don't like it, I guess. And we know that she's capable of standing up for her beliefs and saying what needs to be said and being strong. It just feels like a weird thing because she's been mourning her daughter this whole time and has been really numb. And obviously, grief looks like a bunch of different things. And who's to say how I would react in this situation?
Right. Yeah.
But to me, I think I was annoyed because it does a little bit feel like trying to put Malta on the same level as everything else that's happening. And while I do want Malta to be okay, and I understand that the love of your child is a big deal, like it does feel as important as your country's safety.
There are
realistically, the safety of your country is a bit more important than what's happening to your daughter. Like, it's just like such a hard, like, I don't want to, I'm not trying to say that what she's feeling is not valid. It just, to me, as somebody who knows what's going to happen, who knows obviously the fate of Malta, it's annoying to me that she's just like, hey, the dragon's a liar and I'm going to die to prove it. Feels really extreme. But obviously, this is really extreme time.
And she had extreme feelings about things. I mean, she's been kind of dulled to the world since the quake, really.
Yeah.
And now she has seen her son slowly kind of morphing into someone who's enamored with a creature who might have killed her daughter or aided in the death of her daughter. And now everything kind of broke when she saw her whole town going towards that dragon as well. So the floodgates broke open. She confronts him and she sees Selden kind of glancing fearfully from the dragon to Keffria, and her heart breaks seeing that Selden can't even choose now in between the two. But then Ronica steps forward and puts her arm around her and stands with Keffria.
Which I think is a beautiful moment. Like, I think that is a really big growth moment, I guess, especially for their relationship, because I can see first book Ronica kind of letting her daughter just do this by herself and being like, that's a dumb decision. But I think, especially because I think first book Ronica would not respect any decision Keffria had made on her own.
Maybe,
And now I feel like Ronica recognizes her daughter as being her own entity and using the like familial bond thing to back up her daughter instead of try to make her daughter do whatever she wants.
Keffria finds her voice again and says, give me back my children or give me my death. From somewhere, Reyn Kupris hurtled into them, jostling them all aside. He has a sword in his hand. He says, run, and then says, stop to Tintaglia. And for a wonder, the dragon froze. Her jaws still gaped. A single drop of liquid formed on one of her myriad teeth, and when it dripped into the stone on the concourse, the stone sizzled and gave way to it. But Reyn had not stopped her. Selden had. He had stepped quietly forward to crane his neck up at Tintaglia. His words and manner healed Keffria's heart. Please, don't hurt them, the boy begged shrilly, and his courtier's manners fled. Please, dragon, they are my family, as dear to me as yours are to you. All we want is to have my sister back. Mighty as you are, can't you give that to us? Can't you bring her back? Reyn seized Selden and thrust him towards his mother. Keffria caught hold of him, and her son, truly hers still, no matter how scales lined his face. She holds him tight, and felt her mother's grip on her arm tightened. The Vestrits stood together no matter what else might come. So Reyn is now speaking in front of Tintaglia, saying, like, the dragon can't do everything. Malta's dead.
Yeah, the dragon can't bring back someone from the dead.
Mm-hmm. As he flung back his head to confront the dragon, a trick of the torches sent light dancing along his scaled face, making Reyn appear as dragon-like as Tintaglia. Keffria is right. I will not be seduced. No matter what you can do for Bingtown, you should be revealed for what you are, to keep others from falling to your wiles. Hear me, people of Bingtown. She has entranced you with her glamour. You cannot believe or trust this creature. She will not keep her word. When the time suits her, she will throw aside all bargains and claim one so great as herself cannot be bound in agreement by beings as insignificant as we are. Aid her and you restore to life a race of tyrants. Oppose her now while there is only one to fight.
I have a question. So maybe this is where my frustration is going. Maybe I'm not reading this correctly, and you can correct me in this, but I don't understand why obviously Kefria earlier and Reyn now are so anti let's get help now to solve this really difficult situation like war. Like, I don't understand how they can't put aside okay, I don't know how to word this right, because obviously they think that the dragon is somehow responsible for Malta perishing. I get that. Like, that's really terrible. But I don't see why that means that she can't help them to the ends now. Like,
I mean, Reyn thinks that she was duplicitous, right? She was two-faced in her dealings with him and didn't tell him everything or the truth, or, you know, shirked on her what she promised. So Reyn is feeling like she's just going to lie to get her way and do whatever she can to have her way, which is fair.
Right.
That's what Tintaglia will do.
Yeah.
Kefria believes that and has only seen that, really.
Right.
And heard that. And I feel like Kefria doesn't care at this point about the town as a whole, right? She's more focused on her family. Reyn is already given up on Malta, so says that like that ship has flown, but everyone should know that Tintaglia is bad. Don't get into bed with this snake, basically, you know, or go into it with your eyes wide open. So you're under glamour right now. So stop agreeing with her so easily. Just go into it with your eyes wide open. I think he's already thinking the Chalcedeans already beat, right?
Oh, okay. So you think
they had a battle. The Chalcedeans got chased out. She ate a bunch of them. They're not going to come back anytime soon, is his thinking.
Right.
So why do they absolutely need her?
Okay. I guess, yeah, because where I'm coming from, I'm wondering, like, okay, even if she is lying, even if she's not going to do this, first of all, I don't necessarily know that it's a lie, because she says she'll do it as long as they're working on her thing, and she needs them to do that. So, of course, she's going to keep her end of the bargain. They're getting something good again, like, they're getting something good out of that. Who cares if she's not trustworthy if you get a good enough deal out of it? Maybe that makes me a bad person. I don't know.
But that's the whole thing. If she's not trustworthy, how can you trust her to keep her end of the bargain?
Okay. But yeah, she won't get her what she wants if you can't physically do what she wants, because she isn't upholding her end.
Yeah.
So like, she has to ensure that she gets what she wants. So I feel like in this specific deal, it's not really like, there's no losing on their end. And even then, they have control now of all the baby dragons, or the eggs, which they know can be chopped up into wizard wood, which is really expensive. So ultimately they can keep getting good deals, because they can just be like, listen, we're going to get the wood. if you're not nice.
Tintaglia will kill everyone.
Okay. Not until after they kill all the baby. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like this is so emotionally charged.
Of course.
Which, yeah, obviously. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't make sense. Like, obviously, there's a lot of emotions to be had. But it just, like, to me, and I guess maybe I'm just not personally affected. So I'm like, I don't know. It's a good deal. Get what you can out of it. It's a dragon, you know? Like, do you need her to kill you to show other people that she's not gonna, like, how does that prove that she's not gonna keep her word? You asked her to kill you and she did. If anything, that backs her up.
That's not what they're trying to prove, though. They're trying to prove that she is dangerous, and it's what they're feeling is just the glamour. It's trying to shake them out of that glamour.
Okay, but wouldn't they know she's dangerous after seeing how she killed all the Chalcedeans?
Like you said, not everyone was there. It was probably only 40 people out of the hundreds who have gathered here, maybe thousands.
Touche. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just not reading it right. And maybe
I think
I'm
you're
also
just very anti-Reyn at this point.
yeah, that
And
could
you're like, this man just needs to calm down because Malta's alive. And then also Kefria hasn't been her best in the last couple chapters.
that's fair. I don't know. It just maybe I also don't love when people are like, I'll be a martyr, let me die. Because it's like, what do you mean you're just giving up your life like that? Like if you're alive, there's so many other things you can do. And obviously depression is a thing, and that's not what I'm talking about here. It just I don't know. I don't know how to talk about this, but obviously this is like a very multifaceted topic. And I think, yeah, maybe it is because I don't like Reyn. It's ruining how I'm reading the rest of it. I don't know.
But either way, Reyn is talking to the crowd here, just saying, like, yeah, you're glamored by her. Don't believe her lies. You know, yeah, she can help Bingtown, but
At what cost?
exactly. So Tintaglia is getting very frustrated here, flinging back her head and roaring. Kefria shrank back, but they did not run. The dragon lifted her front feet from the wall's edge and slammed them down again. You tire me, she hissed at Reyn. I lie, you say. You poison minds against me with your venomous words. I lie? I break my word? You lie. Look into my eyes, human, and know the truth. So she spins her eyes, and Reyn is right there looking in. Kefria heard Reyn gasp out his breath and not take another. He was transfixed by the swift silver spinning of the dragon's eyes. The creature did not touch Reyn, but the Rain Welder leaned toward her, his muscles standing out as if he resisted a great force. Kefria reached to restrain him, but beneath her hand his flesh was set like stone. Reyn's lips moved, but he uttered no sound, and abruptly he drops at their feet like a puppet with severed strings. And then we go like 30 seconds back in time to Reyn's point of view as he is touching minds with Tintaglia.
Right.
So they speak in their minds together, and she is saying, faithless little man, you measure me by your own actions. I have not betrayed you. You blame me because you could not find your female, but I had already kept my word to you. I could not rescue your Malta. I did all I could, and then I left you to solve your own problem. You failed. That was not my fault, and I do not deserve to be reviled for it. The failure is yours, little male. Nor did I lie. Open yourself. Touch me and know that I spoke true. Malta lives. And so he kind of goes through like twice before he had touched souls with Malta, the dream box kind of thing. He knows what that touch feels like. And through the connection of the dragon, he kind of feels that same reaching, that same sense of person.
Right. Faint as perfume on the wind, a rare yet familiar sensation touched his mind. Malta. So he can tell it's her. I think this is also a really good look into skill and maybe souls in this universe. Just that it is really unique to person.
Yeah.
And that every person has their own sort of signature thing.
Yeah, we saw that with skill. You know, you can find a certain person if you know what you're looking for.
Right. And so I think this is really interesting to see that mimicked again here, where there's that connection to Malta through the dragon of she's alive, she's there, and it's definitely her. And he knows because he's touched, I guess, souls with her before.
Yeah. So he reaches out, he touches that, and he feels Tintaglia's efforts as if she sorted Malta's thread from a tangled skein of sensations. Here it was strong and clean, and then it vanished into memories of wind and rain and salt water. So he's demanding, like, where is she? Where is she?
How is she?
Yeah, and Tintaglia's like, I can't tell that from this kind of sense, but now you know.
Yeah. She actually, I think this is really important, so I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
I cannot know such things by this sense, the dragon replied disdainfully. As well sniff for a sound or taste sunlight. This is the bonding sense, not meant to flow between human and dragon. You have not the ability to reciprocate, and so she is unaware of your yearning. I can only tell you that she lives somewhere, somehow. Now do you believe me? And I think that's really important because to me, this is proof that whatever the dragon and the bond, I guess, between dragon and humans is different from the wit.
Yeah.
And I think this spells out that it is not the wit. I mean,
Right.
again, the magic in this world is in a circular thing. And so if dragon magic is in the center, it's obviously related. If it's not, this is probably adjacent. But specifically, that this is the bonding sense not meant to flow between humans and dragons. So bonding is like what happens with wit people, right? Human and animal are bonded through the wit. And then they can tell where each other are through that sense. But the dragon cannot do that through her tether.
Yeah, and they can communicate, but through this they cannot.
Yeah. So I thought that was really, really interesting and answers the question, which we have been asking up until this point and going back and forth whether or not it is wit related. So I guess this is a pointer towards it not being wit.
I mean, yeah, we already kind of talked about that in the first trilogy as well when we were talking about magic, how we thought all the dragon magics were related to these magics, but they are a separate thing. And there's talks in the Fitz trilogies that Old Blood is called Old Blood for a reason. It's been around forever.
Right.
Something different.
Yeah. But I also find it interesting that a dragon would know of that magic.
Yeah.
Because it does make me wonder.
Well, she doesn't specifically say it's.
Well, no, but I mean, like.
Old Blood or wit or anything.
That's not the same thing. Like, she knows that it's not the same thing.
Does she? This is the bonding sense not meant to flow between human and dragon. I think she's talking about it's if you're bonded dragon to dragon, you can do some of these extra things.
I don't know.
Because she says that is the bonding sense. Like, this is what you're sensing here is the bond. That is the thing, but it's not meant to be human and dragon. But it's just limited because it is human and dragon connection.
Okay.
That's what I got out of it, at least.
Sure. Okay, sure.
But we switch back over to Keffria's point of view after briefly in Reyn's point of view. And Reyn is kind of saying, like, I believe her. I believe Malta's alive.
And to be fair, I don't think Keffria is super convinced.
No.
And that's low-key Reyn's fault. Maybe I'm being extra harsh here, but Reyn has literally spent all this time saying she's a liar. She'll manipulate you into thinking anything she wants to get what she wants. You can't trust her. And then Keffria watched an entire crowd be entranced by her. And then Reyn stand up to her, look in her eyes, pass out, then wake up and be like, no, Malta's alive. I know it.
Right.
Obviously, she's not going to trust that Reyn knows what he's talking about. So she's kind of like,
Jani is, of course, going next to Reyn and saying, like, what did she do to him? And Keffria watches them both. Did Jani know how much she resembled the dragon? The fine scaling on her lips and brow and the faint glow of her eyes and the torchlight all contributed to the effect. Jani knelt by Reyn's body and stared down at him just as Tintaglia looked down on them. How could one who looked so like the dragon ask her son such a question? Selden knelt beside them, but he gazed raptly up at the dragon that loomed over them. His lips moved as if he prayed, but his eyes were on Tintaglia. I don't know, Keffria replied for her son. She looked down at Malta's stirring betrothed. He looked half a dragon himself, but he had been willing to risk his life to save her daughters. His heart was as human as hers. She glanced at her own son, regarding the dragon so intently. Light ran across Selden's light scaling. He, too, had stood before the dragon and begged for his family. He was still hers. In an odd way, so was Reyn. So, again, in Keffria's point of view here, we have that the two separate sides. It's people are resembling the dragon with their scaling.
right.
But because they stood for the family and human matters, they haven't fully swayed to the dragon as she feared. So she's still like grateful that they're on the human side. So in Keffria's mind, it's still, us versus the dragon.
Right.
So the dragon is throwing her head back and being like, see, he believes me. I do not lie. Come, let us seal the bargain. And Jani then is like, well, there's not going to be any bargain until I know what you did to him, basically.
Right. And Tintaglia is annoyed, and she's like, I just enlightened him.
Yep. Reyn abruptly clutched Kefria's wrist and says, she lives. Malta truly lives. I have touched minds with her through the dragon. Beside her, Ronica gave a broken sob. Kefria still could not find hope. Was this true or a dragon's deception? He drew an uneven breath. Strike what bargain you will with Bingtown, Tintaglia, but before you do, we will make our own agreement, for you have handed me the final piece of a puzzle. Others, dragons like yourself, may still survive. So Tintaglia freezes and demands where to Reyn. And so before all of that goes down, Mingsley once again speaks up.
Right.
And he's like, listen to me. Do the Rainwilds speak for all of us? No. Should this one man be able to halt our bargaining over a matter of a heart? Of course not. So Mingsley again is just, honestly, I don't fault him.
Yeah.
He's
being like
the city's survival is more than one girl's worth, you know?
Right. Which is my problem with all this. It's like, obviously I care about what happens to Malta as a reader, and like, I want her to be okay. I want them to find her. I want her to be rescued. However, practically looking at this from an outside perspective, is Malta's safety at the same level as the safety of an entire town?
Right.
No. And again, I think that's where my problem lies. Like, I did not have this problem the first read through. This is just this deep reading.
In comparison, yeah.
Yeah.
It falls a little flat, a little main character syndrome. How, like, so many of the Vestrits are or Havens, whatever they are, taking center stage and demanding about their specific issue.
Yeah, which has nothing to do with anyone else. And again, I'm still rooting for Malta to be saved. I want her to get help and to be helped, but that's, I think, what my big issue is with Kefria coming in the middle of this saying, I'll die for this to open your eyes, and Reyn saying, she's a liar, you can't believe her. Like, yeah, I get where they're coming from. I get the emotion behind that and why they feel that way. However, in this is this the moment to speak up when everyone in Bingtown is around and they're thinking about their freedom and their future, and you're talking about one person who you believe to be dead?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, Selden also speaks up in favor of his sister's life and kind of compares them to serpents, to Tintaglia, basically kin, you know. And Tintaglia is just like, no, everyone shut up. Reyn, where are the other dragons?
Yeah, she's like, hold on, I don't actually care about anything anymore because I just learned there might be other dragons.
You have seen them? Not yet, but I could find them. Provided you do as Selden suggests. Prove that you understand our kin matter as much to us as yours do to you. Find them where? Reyn smiled. I do not fear to tell you. It will take man's work to unearth them for you. If the elder kind took cocooned dragons into shelter in one city, perhaps they did in another as well. It is a fair trade, is it not? Restore my love to me, and I shall endeavor to rescue any of your kin who may have survived. So she's getting a little bit excited and then says, done, pretty much immediately. So these others will make plans for the dredging of the river. You and I will leave at first light to begin the search for the ancient ruins. No, Reyn says. The dragon's outraged roar rang against the night sky. People cried out in terror and cowered where they stood, but not Reyn. He stood tall and still as the dragon vented her fury. Malta first. Seek for your female while my kind lies trapped in the cold and dark? No. This time the blast of anger from the dragon vibrated the floor. Her ears rang with it. Then we jump over to Reyn in the middle of this conversation, and he's basically saying, this isn't the time to dig. We need to wait for high summer to do that. This is the time to search for Malta. Timing-wise, I'll still hold to my deal with you, but we got to search for Malta first.
Right. Like we can't do it. In high summer, the rivers are lower, so it's easier to do searching and digging. And for this to work, we must negotiate as equals without threats. Will you be calm, or must we both live with loss?
She kind of almost becomes civil and says, speak on.
And then Reyn makes his deal known. You will aid me to save Malta, and I will then devote myself to unearthing the Elderling city, not for treasure, but for dragons. This is our agreement. Your bargain with the Bingtown is more complicated. The dredging of a river for the protection of their coast with other stipulations. Would you have it set down in writing and the agreement acknowledged as binding? And then I am willing to be bound by my spoken word in this. Will the Council of Bingtown deal likewise?
Trader Devouchet is kind of, he just got the power placed back into his hands.
Right, after all this.
Yeah. But he makes the right decision, I think, and says that no, for something as important and as complicated as this, we need to set it down into writing. And we're going to go old style Bingtown on this. And everyone here, not just the leaders, everyone present who wants to be bound to this new Bingtown has to sign or make their mark. And so everyone who makes that mark is part of the new Bingtown and afforded as citizens of the new Bingtown, and will then be able to be represented on a new council that will have to be voted in.
Right. And it's all who sign this will bind themselves not just to the agreement with the dragon, but to each other.
Yeah.
Which is huge. This is exactly what Ronica was hoping for.
Right, yeah.
This is really like resetting the playing field. We're making this a little bit more even now and allowing people to make the choice. It's not just we're the old Bingtown people, so we say this is how it is. It's, hey, you decide for yourself personally. Do you and your family in the future want to live by this agreement? If the answer is no, you don't have to be part of this, but just know
you're not part of Bingtown then.
Yeah, then you have no say in what we do in Bingtown.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way to handle it.
Mm-hmm. So Devouchet is also kind of talking to Tintaglia as well, saying, hey, you need to make your marks on this too, so you understand what's going on. And then you need to look at us, look at charts of the river and mark out things and do all this planning. And Tintaglia's like, no, you guys do all that stuff. I need to look for my kin who are buried or whatever.
Right.
I have no time for this.
Yeah, I have no time for writing and marking. Regard it as done and let us begin tonight.
But Reyn does speak up and offers, again, a compromise here a little bit. Swift is better, on that you and I agree. Let them set their words to paper. Between you and me, I offer you my word, and I am willing to take yours. Dragon Tintaglia, do we have a bargain? We do, the dragon replied heavily. Tintaglia looked at Devouchet and the others on the dais. Set your pen to paper and do it swiftly. I am bound by my name and not by a mark. Tomorrow, Tintaglia begins to do what she has promised. See that you are as quick to keep your word.
Right. So
Bingtown negotiations have been completed.
Yeah, negotiations made. And a new council has to be created. It's
eventually,
lot of changes.
Yeah.
And I feel like we a little bit skipped over, but the big news was also that Tattooed can go up the river and live in.
Yeah, we can talk about that now.
Yeah.
That's a big change. One, great. It's kind of like the perfect place for Tattooed, because they were never going to be happy in Bingtown. Right. At least some of them. Some of them will choose to stay, obviously.
Right.
But some of them were never going to be happy seeing the new traders who enslaved them,
right,
or being around the old traders who didn't
do anything.
Care.
Yeah.
So going up to the Rainwild traders, who are also kind of outcasts of their own, who won't care about their facial marks,
right,
as long as they don't care about the Rainwild traders' facial marks, is an amazing start for them. They have an opportunity to have their own things, to pass on their own legacies, to start their own houses, to start their own families,
and maybe even marry rich. You know,
yeah.
Not that that's
and the Rainwild traders get new generations.
Yeah.
They get an influx of population that they would have never had before.
And not only the new generations, but the fact that the tattooed people are not at all raised in the Bingtown area means that they're way better of a match for the children, because they're not, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to, they're not tainted by the curse.
Right.
So they have nothing. They haven't been generations
more hearty
and
and hale.
Yes, because they haven't been here for generations. Like even the Bingtown people still have babies that are scaly.
Right.
Right. So obviously they are affected by this.
Mm-hmm.
However,
this is fresh meat.
Yeah, fresh meat. Meat's back on the menu, boys. To quote my favorite orc.
Yes. Yeah. So
it's a really big deal in a lot of ways that this is really helping the genetic pool. Also, I am sure all of the Reyn Wilders are basically first and second cousins with all of the old Bingtown traders. You know what I mean? Like,
right,
there's probably a lot of intermingling of DNA. So even better, genetically speaking, that...
Well, there was like, what, 500 families who survived or something like that, I think.
Right.
Total between the two. And that's enough to have enough genetic diversity.
Right.
So, should be okay.
It's still small. You know what I
right,
mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's
a close-knit community.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's good to have non-related people coming in.
That's really only played out in one phrase from Ronica's point of view, that a desperate look of hope stole over Jani's face.
Right.
That's it. That's all that's like talked about for that.
And you know what I really appreciate about that moment is that Jani doesn't take this as an opportunity to trick these
just
people.
Like, perfect, come live with us.
Yeah, she doesn't. Instead, she tells them, hey, I would love for you guys to come. However, it's not going to be...
30% of you are going to die.
Yeah, it's not easy to live in the Reyn Wilds, and it isn't simple. And this isn't just, come live with us. This is integrate with us or die. And and even then you might die. It's really hard out there.
Which is something that she has advocated for when talking to Ronica about Malta's courtship.
Right.
Being like, you have to be upfront about these things because we don't want people to run away. We want them to accept their place here.
Yeah, they should know going in what they're getting into.
Also, she talked about a lot of things that we've never talked about, like the madness seasons.
Yeah. Sorry, the what?
Right. Like it's never mentioned before. People have talked about how on the cursed shore you go mad, which, things are weird there. Fitz walked the cursed shore and survived. And the fool later on is like, what? I've literally heard of no one ever doing that.
Right. Like, that might be a unique experience.
Right. But Fitz talked about going kind of crazy for a year as he was walking.
Yeah.
And they are on the cursed shore technically, but they're away from that section. So there are madness seasons.
But also that is crazy to me because why weren't they upfront about that with Malta?
Right, yeah.
Where was that information when Keffria and Selden and Malta were fleeing their home to go up the Reyn Wilds River?
I feel like it was just something thrown in.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Of like, by the way, there's also madness seasons that we all know about for sure.
Well, I mean, like thrown in by Rob and Hobb.
Yeah,
just to like address the people claiming, oh yeah, you go crazy and you go mad up in the Reyn Wild Rivers.
Like
up the Reyn Wild
sometimes.
River. And yeah, I guess like people living around the city, but it's not seasons.
Yeah, that I don't know. I don't understand it. But at least she's honest about it.
Right.
I think that's a pro. I think that's a big deal.
Or maybe tinfoil hat theory here. Hear me out.
Okay.
The madness seasons are whenever the serpents have the biological need to migrate. And Tintaglia was yelling out during those times, like, I have a biological need to protect the serpents coming, and was just more active during those years.
Interesting.
And those are the quote unquote madness seasons because more of the city was reaching out and the memories were active.
I'm actually obsessed with that and will refuse to believe anything else. Thank you.
That means, according to our thoughts, it might be
done.
Well, it might be done and over with, but that would be very irregular. And seasons indicates it's something that's kind of regular.
Well,
because we were guessing it's what, every like maybe 50 years. That's complete guess of the life cycles, but there would be different generations. But it doesn't mean that there is a brood of serpents every year that was produced. So there's a group of serpents every year trying to migrate. You know, it seems like a big group this time.
right.
I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. We don't know anything about the life cycle and how that works.
But that
We're just taking guesses.
Yeah.
But that would be a tinfoil hat theory, I guess.
But it also, even if it wasn't based off of the real time that, whatever, it could be at the certain time of year when they're supposed to come down the river, the city remembers.
Right.
And so those sort of memories are more active or whatever.
So
just in case.
The madness seasons is the height of summer, basically, when people are exploring in the city more because the river is down.
It would also,
the cocoons are supposed to be formed.
Yeah, it would also make sense if that's the case, because like being the height of summer, because more of the city is exposed.
Right.
And so people would be more exposed to the memories. Yeah. And they do call it like drowning in the memories or whatever, and say that those memories are a type of madness, right? So it could just be that more people are affected by the memories because it's more.
That's what I was kind of aiming towards. But that could maybe account for madness seasons. It's still like, something that's thrown in, but
monsoon season,
right?
Just the madness season, casually.
Well, yeah, it's a big plus for the Reyn Wild people, and we kind of see how that's worked out with. I mean, isn't in the Reyn Wild Chronicles, isn't Tats from a tattooed family?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Or was he a tattooed himself as like a kid?
I think he's tattooed, because the next series is only like 10 years.
A little bit less than 10 years, I think.
Yeah, so it would make sense that a teenager...
Well, it starts... I'm trying to remember, but I think it starts like the first chapter or two is from like a couple years, and then time skips again.
Right, because they watch the hatching of the dragons, which would be a year later.
Yeah.
And
Ellis like skips ahead from her marriage to like multiple years in marriage, and I'm unhappy kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, it would make sense to me that a child would go from being like a 10-year-old tattooed person to
14 to 16 to 18, whatever
anywhere in between 10 to 18, 11 to 18, I guess. So yeah, probably Tats was actually a slave themselves.
Yeah, well, we'll get there when we get there in 5 years.
Yeah.
So finish this chapter up here. Things have kind of come to a head and finalized in Bingtown.
Right.
Now it's just logistics in Bingtown, and then we move on to Malta. So there's more action surrounding Malta.
Right.
And then of course Brash and Althea, and then Kenneth Wintro Etta.
Right. And I just want to clarify from earlier, I don't think the way that Reyn and Keffria feel doesn't make sense. I think in this chapter, I get where they are coming from.
But it's annoying when everyone else is focused on the town survival, and they're like,
it just feels like
my dead love.
Yeah, it feels like small potatoes in comparison to what is happening in the world. And again, I think that's coming from, I'm trying to look at this from the bigger picture point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was reading this more in a normal way that wasn't such a deep read and not a reread, I think I would have a little bit more patience and sympathy for it.
Because those are the characters that
we
empathize with.
Exactly. And I'm not saying it's bad writing on Hobb's part, or I don't know why it's even put in there. I think it makes sense. I think whatever, but I would feel wrong not pointing out that it is weird that they are hung up on that to the extent that they are, to tell an entire town worth of people, hey, this is more important to me than your life and your future.
Right.
And like, I think that's important to talk about too in this moment. Even though it feels like I'm just being really mean, I promise there's a reason for it.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you have thoughts on this episode or what we think about it, please let us know. You can find us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can message us on any of our social medias at isfitzhappy at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, Threads. Any other ones that I missed? I think that's all of them. You could also go to our website, isfitzhappy.com, and find links to anything on there. Please rate, review us. Love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
See you next week. All right. Short little message. Short little talk today about what you guys have brought to our attention. First, I want to thank Ash for sending us a meme. Very good. And that reminded me that I should once again say, please feel free to send in memes that you guys want to make of the chapter. I would be happy to post them. I love memes, clearly, because our Instagram is basically just a meme page. But yeah, thank you, Ash, for sending in a meme. We always love to see those. Anyway, on to a comment that we got from listener Ellen on Facebook. And this comment is about episode 220.
Yep, last chapter.
Yes. And so this is about Luke's comment that the chapter didn't feel like it had a lot of emotional weight to it.
Yeah, so if you remember, it's been a couple weeks since we've released an episode here. So maybe if you are listening to them in a row, you don't need the recap. But that episode was about the lead up to the battle, right? It was the discussion late at night between Reyn and Greg and Selden. They went down to the kitchen, and then they had more discussion there, and then went out and fought, and then Tintaglia came in, right?
And she basically got rid of all the worry about what was going to happen.
But we were kind of talking about how, I don't know, it just happened so quickly, and there was no
build up, no tension.
Yeah, there was just no struggle in Bingtown, really. And Ellen kind of agrees with that, saying that it lacked a lot of that feeling. Ellen says that if it had been Keffria's point of view, we'd have so much worry for the children, the past, the future, or maybe she is too numbed through it all as well. And Ronica is so practical and have already emotionally given up on all the past and only looks to the now. So it's hard to say like who would have been the better point of view from that as well.
But who would have given more emotions to what's going on. And I agree that probably Keffria was too numbed and Ronica would be a little practical. However, I do feel Ronica would have been the better choice, because even if she is worried about the now, I still think she's good about talking through,
at least addressing the trauma, the current like
what
horror.
It would mean if the Chalcedeans won to her, to her family, to the future of Bingtown.
It just felt empty in like a planning session with no emotional connection.
And to be fair, it is Reyn's point of view, and Reyn's not from Bingtown.
True.
He's from Reyn Wilds, which is connected, and they are family in a way. But I do think it is a separation that can definitely be felt here. Like, it's not his home being burnt down or threatened to be burnt down. You know what I mean?
The threat was that they were all going to die too, though.
True.
And we talked about it a bit in that episode too, that he might be feeling a bit disconnected from everything because of his anguish at his loss of Malta. So he wasn't like fully engaged in everything around him. He didn't seem to care that he might die. But that's why I think Ellen agrees here, it wasn't the best point of view.
Right.
And Ellen also goes on to ask about where's Ecky's response to everything. Where is her meltdown or trauma? In all her life, home and memories have recently been lost and burnt down, and still she only smiles and flirts and serves tea.
Yeah.
That's kind of true. It just, it's agreeing with you too, that there is no Ecky point of view. We don't know her thoughts. We don't know how she operates.
Yeah.
We don't know if that's a coping mechanism or if she's just written flatly.
Right. And I think especially last chapter, it feels extra flat.
Yeah.
Which is odd and notable because that's so against Hobb's writing typically, I feel.
It doesn't feel like it should be a coping mechanism because Eki is very, very outspoken for her ideals and what she believes, even against her father's wishes to be outspoken.
Right. So it feels like if she had something to say, she would say it.
Right.
She wouldn't. And I mean, obviously, again, who knows?
But again, we don't have her point of view.
Yeah, we don't know.
In her head, we don't know how she thinks through things.
Maybe her house wasn't burnt down, so it's not as big of a deal, but you would think.
Or maybe she is the self-sacrificing and would be like, well, I need to put on a good front for everybody because we all might die.
Yeah, keep morale up.
Exactly.
Who knows?
We don't know anything about her, which is a shame.
And, there is a little bit, Ellen does give a little bit of grace to Hobb and the writing of this chapter by saying maybe Hobb herself
needed a break
from the darkness of this series, this book, and just couldn't. It was too exhausting to write it more in depth.
Or it could have been edited out because it could have been way too long and involved. I mean, it was a decently long chapter. It wasn't crazy long, but it was an average chapter length. But I guess if you went into the emotions about everything or had points of view from everybody, it could be a short story on its own.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, there could have been other chapters cut out in the editing process. So maybe there originally was more backstory and it all got edited into one chapter that cut a lot of the important stuff like that out, which happens sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, all in all, I think that's one of the weaker chapters that I've read this trilogy, to be honest.
Right. So I think that's a good theory, though, of like maybe it was just editing. Maybe they thought this isn't really that important with everything else going on.
Robin Hobb isn't going to be perfect either, though.
No, Robin Hobb is a human. Yeah. So I don't know. It's still a good book. I think even with that one chapter, it's still a good story. So I think that's good. Yeah. And I think we all agree on that. So thank you, Ellen, for bringing that up. And thank you, everyone who writes in. We always enjoy hearing from you and receiving information from you or thoughts or responses to what we're asking you throughout the chapter. We love to hear from you. See you next week.